Welcome back, everyone. Let's start our discussion where we left it off. So, we had started discussing the institution of family, and in family, we looked at the functions and then we looked at the structure and types of family and what are the factors responsible for change, what are the factors responsible for continuity. And now we have to see what are the changes that are happening to the functions of the family. So, when we started, we had looked at a few functions of the family and now and at the same time we had critically analyzed a few of the functions that what can be the criticisms of family functions, and now we have to see what are the changes that are coming about in these functions of the family. So what we have done is we have taken all the functions in one side at one side, and then we will look at these functions in the light of change. So if you have any questions so far as composition types etc of the family is concerned, you can please let me know. And do remember, when you look at the factors of change, you also have to think about the factors of continuity when it comes to family. And also, what are those elements of family? What are those features of family which show continuity? And also, by this time, you would have realized that when we look at continuity and change, we find that there are few changes, complete changes to those institutions. Then there are new changes, but continuity is also maintained. So the way we broke down the question on caste system, you have to address questions on family in the similar fashion. Okay, so let's start with the first function, the most important function, that is economic cooperation. We were saying that in the traditional Indian society, it was primarily agrarian. And in agrarian society, you find that families are units of production. So they are the ones who will work on the land, who will, say, produce anything from there, and generally consume first within the family. And if at all there is a surplus or they want anything else apart from the crop that they have produced, they'll sell it in the market. But now things are changing. Things are changing in the sense that we do not have, yes, huge population of our country is still engaged in agriculture. But now that one family cannot be considered as a unit of production, because now you see that the families have fragmented. One second thing is a lot of people are engaged in industrial and the service sector. So not just industrial, you can mention it as industrial and post industrial or service society, service based economy. Also, in agriculture, everyone comes together, joins hand and cooperate for production, whereas in your modern society, in modern families, everyone still contributes to contributes to the economy of the family, but now it is more of pooling of resources. What does that mean? It means that it can be so that the father is working in agriculture, is still working in agriculture, earning some income from there. Then the mother might be going out and working in the service sector, another income from there. Then the children might also be working elsewhere as interns, as a regular, they might be having a regular job, they can be entrepreneurs. So all of them put all the resources together, those will be considered family resources, which have been pooled through everyone's contribution, and now they will spend out of it and work as a unit of consumption. Next function is, and also just remember this, if at all a question is asked regarding the continuity and change, you'll find that even though the basic features of the economic system have changed, but economic cooperation still is an important function of family as a unit. So take your example as I've already given. So you're studying somewhere, you might not be, say, uh, contributing to the family income, but you still get economic cooperation from the family. So as far as economic cooperation is concerned, family is still the first unit, the primary unit of economic cooperation. And also, just take the example of elderly. You'll find that elderly are also members of the family, and you'll find that uh, uh, when it comes to modern society, today's world, the government is also contributing to the economic security of elderly. The government is also contributing to the economic security of your differently abled. So even though the function of economic cooperation primarily lies with family, but you also find exceptions in the sense that a few of the members of the family get cooperation, economic cooperation from the state as well. So this also depicts the changing nature of the Indian state. Apart from that, you'll find that social security, taking care of your health, taking care of your education related needs, everything was generally taken care of by family. But now you have an increasing role of the welfare state. You get various scholarships for education. The elderly get old age pension. The differently abled also get pension. So that means it is not only family now, but state is also playing a role when it comes to various functions of the family. So few of the functions have been handed over to the state. Also, you will find that various specialized institutions like your schools, old age homes, etc. have come up. Some of the responsibilities of the family have been handed over to these specialized institutions. Then the matter of social safety. You'll find particularly in troubled areas and in tribal society, you'll find that taking care of the safety of the family, the responsibility lies with the family. If not just family, but maybe with the clan or the tribe that they live in. But now this responsibility of law and order, this responsibility of safety of all the members of the society is being taken care of by state. So we see that some of the functions of the family are now being carried out by the state. Then when it comes to education, previously it was mostly religious education. No formal education was required because people either had to work in the fields or maybe they can take up some handicraft work, which will also be passed on from generation to generation by the family itself. So family had a role in educating their children. Family had a role in socializing the children. But now it has changed again because you have formal education, you have concept of formal education. So you have to go to school to get educated. You have to go to school and other skill centers to find some skills, to get a job in the market. So that's how this function of educating and socializing the children has also changed. It has also been shifted on the state and various specialized institutions. Then when it comes to recreation, as I was giving example of you hearing stories, poems, etc. from family members, now this has also changed. Mass media has taken a center stage when it comes to the role of recreation to entertain children. Now mass media is widely used, be it your cell phones, be it your be it your laptops, movies, Discovery Channel, news channels. All these contribute not just to their entertainment, but they also have a consequence on their value system and their socialization as well. So, what you have to think here is that now that the role of recreation, now that the role of socialization, education, etc., has been transferred to mass media, and with socialization, the socialization is now being carried out using technology. This is a change, but every change will have what consequences. They can have positive consequences and they can have negative consequences as well. So now that we say that socialization and entertainment of the children is being taken care of by mass media, with it has more and more role of technology, what do you think can be the negative consequences of the same? What can be the negative consequences of this change in socialization? Please suggest, because negative thinking about negative changes is simple compared to the positive consequences of this changing nature of socialization of children. Please contribute to this discussion, suggesting what can be the negative consequences of this socialization. Detachment with family. So the bond with the family is not as strong as it was previously, then there can be negative impacts of technology on your health. So be it your mental health, be it your physical health, it can have both consequences. Any other change, any other negative consequence, how about, because if you remember this function of socialization, we were saying your culture, your value system is passed on by the family. What would happen to that? What would happen to that? You would not be able to preserve your culture. You would not adhere to the cultural norms, societal norms. Then a lack of social interaction, because with technology, students and children are perpetually engaged with the smartphones, with their laptops, telephones. You find that there's a lack of social interaction. Now, the problem is not this. This is just on the surface. The problem is, with this lack of social interaction, people do not get to know about their surroundings. They do not get to know about different cultures. They do not get to know about how to behave in public. And you find that this social media, this impact of social media has introverted the younger generations. Okay, so Aditya is saying that now even children are talking about having a boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. So you can say that it has dented the traditional value system of a country. So traditionally, the ideas were different. So for instance, respect your elderly, have love and affection towards family members and other society members, but it would not be the case because they can get exposed to any kind of content online. Now, these can be a few negative consequences of the socialization that is being carried out by technology or with the increasing role of mass media. Now, what can be the positive impacts? Now, this will be the harder part. What can be the possible impacts of this socialization through mass media? So, yes, they'll be more aware about others' cultures. They'll be more aware about what newer options of education are there. What can be, by say, possible path? Because traditionally, what is happening? It is only the exposure of family, very limited exposure, and they would tell that okay, you can either take this direction in agriculture, maybe you can take up engineering, etc. But now with mass media, they have better options. They are aware of the options that they have. Okay. Also, if you remember, this part can come from the criticisms of family. So we were saying that the children are not able to develop their personality completely, properly, according to what they desire. But with this change in the family structure, you'll find, or the function or this function, you'll find that now children will be more aware, they'll be more assertive about their rights. So yes, it can lead to critical thinking, critical and rational thinking. Absolutely, yes. You'll get to know. So we were saying that because of this lack of social interaction, they do not understand the diversity as a negative consequence. But you see, the mass media presents a lot more diversity compared to what they can observe in their surroundings. So what about preserving the diverse cultures? Even though they lose their own culture, they, and it is not necessarily, it need not necessarily be the case, because they can also learn better things about their culture, but they'll also get exposed to the diversity of culture that is there in our country. Also, they'll be exposed to newer languages, newer value systems, newer ideas, newer innovations, which is a positive consequence of this change in the role of socialization. So Ranjit is asking a question here: why is there a need that we preserve a culture even though the Western culture is making us more liberal, is making us more rational? Now, you can answer this question using the Gandhian idea. The Gandhian idea was that do not say be uh, repulsive to the Western culture. Adopt the better parts of the Western culture, keep the better parts of your own culture, and function like that. So whatever negative traits are there in your culture, whatever the problems are there with your culture, put them aside, either fix them and learn newer things from different cultures. Do not let this Western culture overwhelm you, but do learn newer things, whatever you can. Because the idea of democracy that we speak about so much in this country, where did it come from? Western culture. The idea of equality, the idea of liberty, everything is coming from the West, which are better principles, which can help us organize our social and political life better, which can be the way to ensure human rights. So this is how you have to go about this, that you have to remember that whatever positive aspects of other cultures or other religions are there, you can adopt them, but without losing whatever good part is there in your culture. So do you have to be superstitious to be, say, to be said that you are, say, more engraved in your culture? No, you do not have to be. You can be rational, but you can be respectful. You can be respectful to elderly. So all those things, you just consider both the positive parts of both the cultures, and that would give you the answer. Okay, so Ragni suggested something good here as well, that with the change in the role of socialization and education of the family, now more and more children are enrolling in school. So rather than getting religious education, rather than getting, say, regressive education at home, they are getting to learn newer things, better things, scientific things in their schools, which can ultimately guarantee them a good quality of life, which can make them a better human being. So good, great. So the idea behind this was, because this was the question, whatever we have discussed here is actually the question asked in this year's paper. And trust me on this, because you have so casually replied to this aspect. Once I broke it down for you, maybe if I would have posed the question directly, you might not have been able to. But when I broke it down, you were able to conceptualize, you were able to get to these things easily. But trust me, if you ask anyone who has written mains this year, they're not able to satisfactorily answer that question. But now you have. How? Because you are engaging in this discussion, and that's how you learn. Rather than I telling you that this is how you have to go about it, no, let there be an approach of your own. Okay, great. Apart from that, when it comes to religion, religion has become more of a private affair, and you'll find increasing number of children today, particularly the younger generation, you'll find they are not very particular about religion. They understand it as someone's private matter. They do not engage into the religious activities, religious rituals, affairs at home. Whereas in joint families, whereas in traditional families, you find that religion was something very significant. Religion was something that was being passed on by your family. Religion was something from where you learned your moral values. If you remember, they'll tell you stories from Ramayana, Mahabharata. With those anecdotes, they'll tell you that this is the value that you should value the most, that should be most important on your priority list. But now your value system is being influenced more by outside factors rather than your own particular religion. So you might be learning a lot of things from another religion using the internet, using the mass media. Because of globalization, there are so many people around you coming from different cultures, different, say, nationalities, etc. So you learn a lot from their system. And this is something that has to apply in a private life or personal life as well, that wherever you find that this is something that can be of immense value, you can always adopt that without thinking about whether you are losing your culture or not. Because if you drop a few negative aspects from your culture, it is not going to do any harm. It will ultimately make you a better person. So rather than being very rigid about being Western or being, say, Eastern or Indian, it is better to be rational about things. So your scientific approach has to come into play here, because this is something that is going to help you not just grow as an individual, but with your paper 4 as well. Right? So whatever contradicting values you find, because in ethics you'll find that there are contradicting values. So someone might say that freedom is more important. Then other might say contributing to the community is even more important. So there can always be contradicting values. What you have to do is you have to think about them yourself and reach your answer, rather than someone telling you that this is important because this. Better than that, you should put yourself in a situation where you understand it yourself. Okay, so what we have done is we have looked into the changes when it comes to the institution of family. This is just an image that I found, that you can just look at what are the newer kinds of families that are coming up. So family as an institution is undergoing change, and then there are newer families that are coming up. So there can be, say, live-in relationships. There can be, say, step families. There can be two people family. For instance, the father and the children, or the mother and the children. These can be newer types of families that are coming up. You can just go through it, need not remember, because this is something that you observe around you. So if you observe something, if it can be used as a good example, please go ahead, use it as an example. And also, as I've already told you, that do look into various copies of toppers, how they write answers. You'll find that they also write simpler examples. They use simple language, they write simple examples which are relatable. So rather than, say, uh, giving views from, say, Dr. Ambedkar or Mahatma Gandhi every time, it's better while you read the newspaper, if there is something good that is happening, if there is an, say, officer who did something well, etc., you take out those examples, because they'll be helpful in your ethics paper. Not just ethics paper, but you might also find examples for your social issues paper as well. Okay, so with this, we have covered two institutions. One is caste system and the other one is family. Now the third institution is marriage. Now marriage is an institution. As we have already discussed, marriage as a bond within a family. It is an institution for admitting men and women into family life, legitimizing offsprings, and establishing other rights and duties of the husband and the wife. So marriage is the institution which is basically the socially accepted form of bringing two people into a relationship, helping them legitimize their offsprings. Because if someone is not married and a child is born, what are they considered? Generally, illegitimate children. So to legitimize these offsprings, this institution of marriage is there. Now, can anyone here dispute this definition of marriage? Anyone here can dispute this definition of marriage, as I've already taught you how to. Sneha will take up that question towards the end. It is there in the PPT again. No, this definition of marriage, because live-in relationship is not a marriage. Yes, it can admit people into this institution of family, but it is not equivalent to marriage. Just look here. It says, the definition says, an institution for admitting men and women. Yes, Sumit. Now you can have same-sex marriage. It need not be the opposite gender to marry. So this is the basic idea about marriage. But the first question should be, why at all marriage as an institution exists? And your answer will come from various functions of marriage. Now you'll find that these functions of marriage are more or less related to the function of family, and you'll be right to that extent. And the only thing you have to understand is, when we say family, family can be extended or it can be nuclear. But when you say marriage, and you mention the word marriage, then again you have to consider the relationship between the two people involved in that marriage. And also you'll find that sexual gratification, procreation, that is giving birth, then emotional support, economic cooperation and security, all these functions are similar to that of family. Because with marriage you get a life partner with whom you can share your emotions, with whom you can share your ideas, with whom you'll come together and pool economic resources. You'll provide economic security to each other. You'll gratify each other sexually. So all the biological, economic and the psychological functions are mentioned here. The only function that is missing here is socialization of children. But ultimately, if after a marriage procreation is the norm, generally in India, after marriage, giving birth is the norm. So with this institution of marriage, you find that the responsibilities, duties, everything for all the members of the family are fixed with this marriage, at least that immediate nuclear family. Now what you have to do is, you have to think first in the changing nature of functions, second in the changing nature of marriage as an institution. But before we get into that, you keep thinking about it, because it is very similar, the structure is very similar to family. But before that, you just look at types of marriage. Now the basic idea that we have about marriage is, and as our definition said, that and making two people enter in a relationship, legitimizing their relationship, that is what the function of marriage is. So one idea can be, there are two people. Now these two people can be from the opposite or the same sex, but here, for the convenience of our discussion, let's consider them to be coming from different genders. Now one idea is that only two people are getting married, one boy and one girl, they are getting married to each other. What is that? Monogamy. But there can be other forms as well. There can be a way in which there is one boy and, say, three girls getting married. Similarly, there can be three boys getting married to one girl. That means multiple partners as far as marriage is concerned. So you have multiple examples. So you have example from Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, you find that there's one girl, Draupadi, who got married to five brothers. What is that? Polyandry. Polyandry means one girl and multiple boys getting married. So one form of polyandry is fraternal polyandry. Fraternal means uh, when the husbands are actually brothers, as in the case of Mahabharata. But you'll still find non-fraternal polyandry as well. In non-fraternal polyandry, you'll find that a girl is getting married to multiple boys who are not brothers, who are not related by blood. What is that? Non-fraternal polyandry. Now, with respect to polyandry, I think a few of you might be aware, who are particularly from North India. You have example from Himachal Pradesh, wherein fraternal polyandry particularly is prevalent. Even though by law it cannot be, say, carried on, but yes, it is still prevalent in few parts of the country. And yesterday I was reading a book about a tribal society, and I just, sorry, I forgot the name of the tribal group. They also practice polyandry. Now can you tell me, can you think about this, why at all would polyandry be prevalent? Because this idea, for people coming from general background who are not aware of these things, it comes as a shock, that how is it that a girl can have multiple husbands? So can someone give an idea? Can someone give an idea that that what can be the reasons behind this? So the case of Himachal Pradesh, I'll give you an example. I'll give you the exact reason, but otherwise, not having children, okay, it can be one, but you do not need to marry someone. There can be adoption, surrogacy, right? Great, Vishal. So Vishal has highlighted that to keep the property from getting fragmented, it is generally this polyandry is prevalent. Because even in case of Himachal Pradesh, because what happens after the brothers get married, say those two boys are getting married to different girls, then there'll be fragmentation of land. The property will be divided amongst the two, and which is considered to be that why should we at all fragment our land? Because in agrarian societies, in tribal societies, land becomes very important. And not just not that it is not important in urban areas, but there is sentimental value attached to it. Because in urban areas, If you're living in a place for 5-10 years, even if you have to change after some time, you would not mind. But in rural areas, particularly in agrarian society, you find that property has been flowing from the generation, has been getting passed over the generations. So there is a lot of sentimental value attached to it. So to stop that fragmentation of land, polyandry can be prevalent. Can there be another reason for the prevalence of polyandry? Okay, yes. So Sumit has again already highlighted that if the sex ratio is skewed against the women, that means if there are less number of girls compared to the number of boys, you'll find that polyandry can also become acceptable. So even in this case of Himachal Pradesh, it is actually based on both the reasons. One is land and the other one is the skewed sex ratio. And even though you find that there are no instances of say female feticide or female infanticide in this region of Himachal Pradesh, and this is also limited to a few tribes, but then still the sex ratio is skewed. So that gives them more reason to get into polyandry. And particularly, and you remember this, it is particularly fraternal polyandry. So it is generally the brothers who get married. Then another form of this polygamy can be polygyny. In polyandry, one girl and multiple boys. In polygyny, it is one boy and multiple girls. So one husband having multiple wives. So you have example for polygyny, you have multiple examples ranging from ancient India, medieval India, because we find this thing that as we are moving forward, as we are becoming more and more modern, polygamy is on a decline. But previously in traditional societies, you find that polygamy was not prevalent, but yes, it was exercised. So that you had your kings who had multiple wives. Then similarly, also you have example coming from various regions in India and various social groups. So what I'll do is to explain you this part, I have this. So this is a clipping from a newspaper wherein you'll find that there is prevalence of polygyny, particularly polygamy in the form of polygyny in a lot of regions in our country. Then they have also, what they have also done is they have taken up the religious background of those people. So these are the percentage of people coming from different religions who practice polygamy. Yes, so polygyny is also prevalent in tribes in Arunachal Pradesh, and also you have to remember when I was saying that the tribals have a different value system, they have different customs, norms, etc. And this is something that we will take up at the end. So remember that tribals will, all the exceptions that you'll find when it comes to Indian society will generally come from tribals. So be it Garos, Khasis, where you have matrilineal, matrilocal, and matriarchal families, you find that they are also tribals. The example of Himachal Pradesh that I've given you is again coming from tribals. So now you do not have to remember this data, but this gives you an insight on how polygyny is still prevalent in Indian society. This data is coming from NFHS 5 and it is being compared to your NFHS 3. Need not worry about the data. All you have to see is that there are trends. It is not that only Muslims have, say, high prevalence of polygyny, but in a few states, even in Hindus, there is high prevalence of polygyny. One thing. Second thing is, it is also related directly to the wealth or the economic strata of the society that you are coming from. Generally, you'll find in poorer households, the prevalence of polygyny is more. Why? Because they have more reasons to keep that land. They have multiple reasons for the same. Also, with your poor socioeconomic background, what happens is the levels of education and awareness are low, and you'll also find that it is more prevalent in societies where the educational level is low. Now, coming back to the question that someone had highlighted in the previous session, talking about women empowerment and control in population growth, which I said was a previous year question that will be discussed. So here is some data which can actually be used. So you can say that if women are empowered, they will assert their rights. They'll know about their rights. They'll know about what is right, what is wrong. So their empowerment can definitely lead to a control in population growth. Even though this is not directly about control in population growth, which I will deal separately when we discuss that part, but here it gives you a glimpse into how women empowerment or how education can make things better. Because this question is being asked a lot, that we go on suggesting that education can do this, can do that, but how can you substantiate that? So the way the data coming from various reports, etc., from society in general, you'll find that using those various reports, etc., you can substantiate whatever statement you are making. So you can just go through this once. You can go through this once while revising, just to highlight that how the trends are. Now let's come to the next part, which talks about rules of spouse selection. Again, please remember, you do not have to remember anything. This is just for your basic understanding, because every aspect of your marriage or marriage as an institution is changing, even your rules of spouse selection. So let's look at a few rules which are prohibitive, and then there are few rules which are prescriptive. So the first idea is, if you are related to someone by blood, say your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, it is absolutely forbidden to get married within your same blood group, within the family, which is termed as incest taboo. And more or less every society, apart from I have example of a couple of tribes from Africa, wherein they actually can get married to someone to someone whom they are related by blood. But generally across the globe, you'll find that incest taboo is something that you generally do not marry within your own family. It is considered to be incest. Then there is this idea of exogamy, as already highlighted, that you are not supposed to marry within your same village, within your same clan. Then uh, even in a few places, in a few regions, you'll find that if this is your village and these are 4 or 5 villages which share boundaries with your village, you're not even supposed to marry in these villages as well. So there are various rules which prohibit people from getting married. Then there is endogamy, that you are supposed to marry within the same caste group. You're supposed to marry within the same religious group. That is also another rule, prohibitive rule of spouse selection. Then in caste system, we were saying that a person is not supposed to marry outside their caste. Endogamy is strictly practiced, but there were a few exceptions. So one idea is the idea of pratilom or hypogamy, which is prohibitive, which says a girl cannot marry a boy coming from a relatively lower caste. So if a girl is from, say, the star can say reflect the idea of from say so-called higher caste, and if the boy is from a comparatively or relatively lower caste, they cannot marry. This is the idea of pratilom viva. Then there were a few exceptions that were made when it comes to endogamy practiced within the caste system. But again, there were regional differences. Endogamy was prevalent pretty much throughout the country, but there were exceptions. So one exception is Anulom Viva, which says a girl can definitely marry a boy coming from a relatively upper caste. So a girl can marry a boy coming from a relatively upper caste. That is what hypergamy or Anulom Viva. Again, I'm just explaining these things, these ideas, so that you can highlight the changes. You do not have to remember anything. Now, then there are other prescriptive rules. You would have seen in a few movies, or maybe you have examples from your own society, your village. You'll find that if the husband, by any chance, if the husband dies, the wife is made to marry the brother of the husband, the unmarried brother of the husband. That is one practice. And maybe you can have examples, if not from around you, but you can definitely have examples from the movies that you might have watched as kids. That is called levirate. So in Todas, you'll find that if the husband dies, if the girl is left widow, she is married to the unmarried brother of the husband. Similarly, if the wife dies, if the wife dies, the boy is married to the sister, unmarried sister of the wife. This is called sororate. So these are also a few prescriptive rules. Also remember, please remember that these are not, say, universal rules. These are found. There are a lot of regional differences that are found. Now, then another idea is cousin marriage, getting married to your cousin. So we were saying that within the family you cannot marry, but can you marry your cousins? So if you go to the southern part of the country, and maybe if someone from South India is there, you'll find not amongst all these social groups, but you'll find it is very prevalent that you can marry your cross cousin. That means you can marry the daughter of your maternal uncle, or maybe your paternal aunt's daughter. Now again, you do not have to remember, you can just remember cross cousin, because there's no point explaining all the idea of cross cousin and parallel cousin. And if at all you want me to explain this, I can. But then in Muslims, you'll find parallel cousin marriage is also prevalent, wherein, so okay, let me explain so that you understand the difference. Children, and then this is your uncle, aunt, and children. Now this is your paternal uncle. One can be your maternal uncle. Then you can have your paternal aunt, and another idea is your maternal aunt. So what happens is, in parallel cousin marriage, see, you are the child. In parallel cousin marriage, you can get married to the children of your paternal uncle or your maternal aunt. These are who? Your parallel cousins. In cross cousins, you'll find that you can marry your paternal aunts or your maternal uncle's children. This is what the idea of parallel and cross cousin is. This is just to explain you do not have to remember at all. You just have to remember that these are a few prescriptive rules when it comes to marriage. Even, and also I've mentioned it here in the case of cross cousin, so that it will be easier for you to understand and you would not get confused later. Now all these rules of spouse selection you do not have to remember. This is just for your basic idea. I'll repeat again. Moving on. Now, this rules and spouse selection will give us a point when it comes to changes in marriage. But before we come to whatever the changes in marriage, please tell me, what are the factors responsible for bringing about changes in the institution of marriage, and what are the elements of continuity when it comes to marriage? How do you go about it? First let's speak about factors. Aditya, exogamy is basically not marrying within the same tribe, or not marrying within the same clan. So for instance, if you have a surname, say your surname is X, so you cannot marry anyone within this gotra, because your surname basically denotes your gotra. So you are not supposed to marry anyone because they are supposedly your brothers and sisters. Also, there are rules that range from place to place. So for instance, in Haryana, you'll find that if there is a village, if you are from this particular village, all the surrounding villages which share a boundary with your village, you cannot even marry in those villages. So what are these rules? Exogamous rules. Okay, so please tell me, what are the factors responsible for changes in the institution of marriage? We'll come to what are the changes, but let's first think about what are the factors responsible for this change. Yes, you can think of technology, great. Again, modern or Western education, great. globalization, westernization, modernization. And the ones who are not able to understand right now, we will discuss these factors when we discuss the changes in education, changes in marriage. Great. Yes, Avni, you have highlighted all these points in one place. Great. So there can be government policies, etc. Now let's look at these. Great. You have said the right things. What we'll do is we'll look at what kind of changes have happened in the institution of marriage, and then we'll come down to the factors of continuity or the elements of continuity in the institution of marriage. Now, when you have to look into the changes in marriage, what do you look into? You look into various features of marriage and also the functions of marriage. That not just the features, but the functions of marriage are also changing. Now, the first idea is we are moving more and more towards monogamy. So, if we start from, say, traditional society, the prevalence of polygamy was more compared to what we have currently. So, this idea of having one partner, having one life partner, and even for generations altogether is something that we find now. Then, when it comes to spouse selection, it was primarily based on the compatibility of the two families. It was primarily coming from your parents because they used to tell you that this is the boy or the girl that you have to marry, and without any questions being asked, you were supposed to marry them. But now things are changing. So self-selection does not necessarily mean a love marriage, but now at least you are given time and opportunity to have a word with the boy or the girl, find out what are your shared interests, what where do you find yourself in the future, so on and so forth. On the basis of all those things, on the basis of your interaction, you are given a chance to select the spouse for yourself. So now it has changed to self-selection of spouses. Otherwise, it was primarily coming from your family. Then previously we were saying that the compatibilities of families was important, but now it is more about the comparative merit of the boy and the girl than the family. As I've given you examples, so see, both of you are say placed here, you live in the same city, you work similar kinds of job, you have a similar thought process, you are pretty much in the same age bracket, and that was the reason. Previously you'll find that the girl or the boy is, say, 30 years old and the girl is 15 years old, and they get them married without thinking at all about the compatibility between the two. Then also you'll find these intercaste and interreligious marriages are more acceptable now. So even though you'll find that most of the marriages still happen within the same caste and the religious group, but these forms of marriages have become more acceptable. As you have already given this point, that age of marriage has increased. The legal age of marriage has increased. Now you have fewer instances of child marriage. And then also, in traditional Indian society, we used to say that marriage is an intergenerational contract. Marriage is something that cannot be broken. There's no idea of divorce when it comes to Hindu culture. But with your 1955 Hindu Marriage Act, you find that it has become contractual in nature. Now you can get a divorce. Now it is not an intergenerational contract. So the ones who can understand Hindi, this intergenerational contract is generally the Hindi word that is used for it as janmo, or you are not married for one generation, but for generations to come. Right? It is janmo ka bandhan, basically. So, but now you can get a divorce. Previously, the Hindu marriage was indissoluble, but now you can get a divorce. It is more like a contract. And in Western societies, yes, janmo janmo ka saath. Yes, yes. Now I get it. And also you'll find that this idea of marriage as a contract, as a legal contract, is coming again from the Western society, because there was no idea of having this contract. So yes, there were say social sanctions, because during that wedding ceremony you are supposed to you are told your rights and duties with respect to this bond of marriage. both the girl and the boy. But this Western form, wherein it is more of a legal contract and it can be broken off at any given point of time, is something new. Then also you'll find that dowry has been attached to marriages since ancient times. But now you find that dowry has been abolished by law, but you still find that dowry demands have not decreased significantly. You can just improve this, because the above part sounds very strong, that dowry demands have not decreased. So you say that dowry demands have not decreased much or have not decreased significantly. You still find that dowry is still attached. You can call it a gift, you can give it in cash, which cannot be traced, but dowry somehow has still existed in our modern society. Then we were saying that the duties and responsibilities of the people getting into this contract of marriage are fixed, but these things are becoming more egalitarian now. Now it is because previously the girl or the wife was supposed to cater to all the needs of the husband, no questions asked. But things are changing now. Similarly, when it comes to the function of sexual gratification, you can think about the idea of marital rape. Because the way women have been treated in our society, they were considered mere objects. They are considered mere objects of sexual pleasure of the men. But now things have changed. So the Honorable Supreme Court has said, be it a person who's married or not, if there is no consent from the girl, it will be considered a rape. So this has also changed that function. Similarly, the function of, say, emotional companionship, it is changing as well. That the girl and the boy need not necessarily rely on each other. Then there has been change in the value system, and you'll find that having extramarital affairs has become very common, particularly in urban centers. Why? Because of change in value system. Divorces have become more prevalent now. What are all these? These are changes in the institution of marriage. Now, if you have to look into the factors of continuity, what all elements of marriage would you highlight? What all elements of continuity would you highlight here? So Himanshu is saying tradition and culture. So rather than putting it like that, you can talk about various rituals related to marriage. There has been a few changes, but most of the rituals have remained the same. So we can say, as far as rituals of the marriages are concerned, they have remained the same. There is a continuity. Again, various functions of the family have remained the same: sexual gratification, emotional support, etc. Dowry is still prevalent, which is also attached to marriages. So again, same-sex marriages are not accepted. So marriage is still considered to be an affair between opposite genders. Then even though we say that intercaste and interreligious marriages are more acceptable now, but we find that most of the people still marry within the same caste and religious group. Also, will we still find instances of child marriage happening? We still have instances of polygamy, etc. So I hope you can, looking at all these elements or thinking about all the features of family as an institute or marriage as an institution, you can get this answer. So is there any problem related to these changes and continuity in marriage? Please tell me if you have any problems related to that. I, Aditya, I'm not getting your question. You're saying, is marital rape legal? So if you're trying to ask, is marital rape prohibited? Yes. So if there's no consent of the women, you're not supposed to have sexual intercourse. Vishal is saying that as far as the function of legitimizing the offspring is concerned, marriage is still the primary organization for, or primary institution for that. Yes, it is. So that also shows continuity. So what we have done is, and let's do one thing before we start with next part. Okay, so I have somehow removed the question. Let's go back to the question on family that has been asked in the past. So the question said, the life cycle of a joint family depends on economic factors rather than social values. Life cycle of a joint family depends on economic factors rather than social values. So if you talk about life cycle of a joint family, so a joint family, just think about this life cycle first. Joint family can be disintegrated and become a nuclear family. And also, this nuclear family can go back to becoming a joint family again. So it can be a cycle. One idea is that. So you remember this idea because generally what happens is we always think about disintegration of joint family when we look at a question like this, but it is not just about disintegration of joint family, but it can also be transition from nuclear to joint family. One thing is that. Now they're saying there can be economic factors. The statement is saying there can be economic factors plus there can be social values responsible for this life cycle of a joint family. So we will come to the question, but first think about various economic factors and social values on which the life cycle of a joint family depends. Yes, Neha, diversity is a feature of Indian society, and how I put it across is I say unity in diversity is a salient feature of Indian society, because diversity is a feature of each and every society. There is diversity no matter which society you go into, but unity in diversity is a salient feature of Indian society. Okay, so let's take it up one by one. First, think of various economic factors. You are seeing fragmentation of land. Great. It can be economic cooperation within the family. What else? Just think about this thing. The answer will come from thinking. You do not have a, say, ready-made answer for this, but it will come from thinking. The only thing we have to do is we have to cover all the perspectives. Rather than keeping it one-sided and thinking about disintegration of a joint family, we also have to think about integration of a joint family as well. Migration, looking for better economic opportunities. Great, yes. Yes, so the way resources are distributed within the family or the way economic cooperation works out in a family can also be responsible. Let's just stick to first parts once. So the question says the life cycle of a joint family depends on economic factors rather than social values. So we get two perspectives. One is, yes, it depends on economic factors rather than social values. And the second idea says, yes, it depends on economic factors, but social values are also important. The question asks us to deal with this part, that how it depends on economic factors rather than social values. So the alternate perspective can be used as conclusion or maybe as introduction, that we are sure. Now we are trying to deal with body part, in which we are thinking that how these economic factors impact the life cycle of a joint family. Now think there is a joint family, all the people are living together. But then what happens is, because over the years, over the generations, the land got fragmented, they're not able to take out enough production, or the land is not that productive to cater to all the needs of the people of the family. So what would happen is that because of this fragmentation of land, they would not be able to say have a good amount of production from the land. And say one of the brothers says that, okay, I'll travel to the city, I'll stay there, take up another job, because there are better economic opportunities there, take up a job there and take care of my family. What it can lead to? It can lead to disintegration. Similarly, you say that if there is a feud between the brothers, and if one feels that the other one is not working, is not contributing according to the share that he gets in the business, in the family business or in agriculture, it can break it off. Similarly, you'll find that there can be factors which can which can integrate this joint family. So think about this brother who had left to the city for better opportunities. Now what happens is the land under production uh, becomes barren over the years, and the brother who was living in the village feels that now it's time for me to move out of the village and go live in the city. So he goes in the city, takes his family and the parents with him, and starts living with the brother who was already there. So this nuclear family became joint family again. Similarly, the brother who had went to the city, because of some reason, few years down the line, he lost his job. The way you have seen during the COVID lockdown, a lot of people lost their jobs, and they have no option but to return back to their ancestral home. They have no option but to go back to agriculture, which in turn will make this nuclear family a joint family. So when you think about the life cycle of a joint family, because I've seen most people writing only one side of it. So you do not just write about disintegration, but also this nuclear family becoming joint family again. So your primary body part is going to be this. Now what you have to do is that you can use this idea of social values either in the introduction or in the conclusion. Now what you can do is, first thing is that life cycle of a joint family depends not just on economic factors and social factors, but it also depends on various political decisions. If you remember the legislative measures, right, because of various legislative measures, joint families can get disintegrated. So this example of fragmentation of land is coming from a legislative measure. So you can say in the introduction that yes, or not yes, you do not have to write yes or no, that you can write that there are multiple factors on which the life cycle of a joint family depends, or maybe you can create this life cycle there, or maybe clarify that when you talk about life cycle of a joint family, it is both way, it works both ways. It is not just disintegration of a joint family, but it is also reinstating of a joint family. Then you write about there can be political factors like Land Sealing Act, which can also lead to disintegration of a joint family. So you can write this. Then you come to the body part wherein you mention the economic factors, wherein you go about this answer. And then ultimately, in conclusion, you give a perspective on social values. Now, my second question is, what are these social values on which the life cycle of a joint family depends? What are these social values? Yes, Ragini, pandemic-like situation. Yes. What are the social values on which life cycle of a joint family depends? Love and affection, for example. So if the brothers do not share a good bond, it can also lead to disintegration of the family. Then also just think about this. There is only one brother there's only one son to a family who gets married. But now because he doesn't care for the elderly, he doesn't respect the elderly, he moves out, leaves them behind, makes it a nuclear family, or disintegrates the joint family. What is this? Based on social values. Similarly, based on social values, children now demand more and more freedom. So if they stay within the home, they would not get the kind of freedom that they want. They would want freedom to do anything at any point of time without thinking about it. So these can be a few examples of social values, how change in social values can impact the life cycle of a joint family. Yes, so independence and individual living, voice of the elderly, love and affection, support and security, perfect. So I hope you have got the crux of this question. So in introduction, you can write about other factors on which the life cycle of a joint family depends. For instance, political factors. In the body part, you have to write primarily about the economic factors, and then in the conclusion, what you do is you either write about social values, or maybe you can write about these social values in the introduction to just give them a perspective that yes, I know both sides of the coin, but as you have demanded that you write about one part, that's why I'm writing only that part. Otherwise, I know about the other dimension of this question as well. Okay, so please give a quick thumbs up if this question is clear. This was a small question, so you do not need a lot of points. This was a 150 word question, 10 marker. So whatever content we have discussed is more than sufficient. The only idea that you have to remember is that the structure is important. If you understand the structure of these social institutions, you cannot miss a single question. And trust me, these are the kind of questions that everyone generally finds difficult to answer. And look at yourself. You have been answering these questions casually. And these are considered to be difficult questions for that matter. Okay, moving ahead to the next part, which is diversity in India. So we are saying that diversity is a salient feature of Indian society. What diversity? Diversity of people coming from various linguistic backgrounds, diversity of various castes, diversity of various racial and ethnic groups, diversity in terms of geographical features, diversity in terms of tribes, diversity in terms of religion. So all these are various indicators of diversity in our country. Now you have to remember, you have to understand that two, three ideas have to be discussed here. So one is the idea of diversity, another is the idea of uniformity, and then there is idea of unity. Diversity, uniformity, and unity. We'll come to these one by one. Yamya is saying that it's clear, but what type of lines, etc., to use? See, the best way to find that out, Yamya, is to try writing this answer, send it across to IS Live, and you'll understand that whether the language was apt or not. But the kind of language that I've used, the way in which things are written is actually fine. But now you find that this is the first module, this is the first lecture, introductory lecture. That's why I've not added a lot of content. But moving ahead, I'll be adding more and more content in the slides. So that'll help you with the language part. But I do not do it deliberately, so that you try to do it yourself first, and only then you look at how actually others are doing. Because your creativity will actually play an important role. Because once you look at someone else's answer, someone else's language, you try to imitate that. But when it comes from within, it is more structured, it is better to understand. Okay, coming back to diversity. Now these collective differences between people can be on the basis of religion, language, caste, etc., etc. Now my first question here, before we come to all the other ideas, I say that we say that there has been diversity in India, but there are changes to this dimension as well. The diversity in India is changing. So who all here say that the diversity in India has increased over the years? Who all say that the diversity has increased in the country, in Indian society? And how do you justify that? How can you say, what are the reasons behind this increase in diversity as you put it across? Anyone? Okay, globalization, migration, etc. So a few of you are saying that the diversity has increased over the years, because you see a lot of new religions have entered India, have entered our society. Take, for example, Christianity. Western religion entered India in the modern times. Now, similarly, you'll find that because of globalization, you find a lot of new languages, exposure to a lot of new languages, like the one that we're speaking right now. Also, with migration, you get exposure, or you find that a lot of people from outside migrate to India. They can be from a different culture, they can be from a different race, because you'll find people coming from Africa, you find people coming from the US, you find people coming from Russia, you find people coming from Israel. So everyone has a different culture, everyone speaks a different language, everyone is from a different race. So which ultimately adds to the diversity of our country. But now there are some, like Sneha, who say that the diversity in India has gone down as well. But how do you justify that? How do you justify the ones who are saying, no, it has not just increased, but it has decreased as well? What are the reasons for this decrease in diversity in India? So, yes, Abhinav, many languages, many dialects have gone extinct. People have not been able to retain their culture and language and pass it on to next generation. Now, also, when you say religion, in religion, just understand that we always had in a country various tribal groups. These tribal groups used to follow their own religion, their own animistic religions. But now you find that a lot of those religious practices have gone extinct, and also a lot of these tribal groups have been subsumed within the fold of Hinduism and Christianity primarily. You find most of your central Indian tribes, they have adopted Hinduism. Similarly, in Northeast, particularly Nagaland, etc., you'll find that those tribal groups have started following Christianity, leaving their animistic religions behind. So, in true sense, India was a lot more diverse uh, in the ancient past compared to what it is today. Because now we have limited exposure. So, when you say religion, you are talking about those established religions. But in case of India, particularly tribal groups, each and every tribal group used to follow a different religion. But now they are homogenized. So there is more of homogenization of Indian culture when we think of globalization. So yes, with the Western influence, the diversity of festivals we used to have has increased, in the sense that newer festivals, Western festivals, are being celebrated here, like Valentine's Day, that you all must be aware of, and then other festivals as well. But at the same time, we find that uh, the significance of various local festivals has gone down. So if you think of the usual festivals that are celebrated, like Holi, Diwali, Eid, etc., it has remained more or less the same. Even and you'll find that more and more people are now celebrating these festivals, because otherwise they were not pan-Indian festivals. They were regional festivals, but they have become more significant. But there were a lot of local festivals that are struggling to survive. They are not being celebrated by a lot of people. So, for instance, the society that I come from, we had festival wherein so it's okay, you would not be aware. So we had a festival which has almost gone extinct. Not many people celebrate that festival. Rather, people rather you can say that there has been homogenization of our culture as far as festivals are also concerned. We'll come to homogenization because it is the next chapter, so I'm not explaining it much. And you'll understand it a bit with uniformity. Do not worry about it. We'll discuss it with globalization. So, yes, similarly, Sumit is saying that the dominance of Hindi and English and your, say, dominant regional languages has led to a decline in the number of dialects we had in our country. So, one idea is about change that has been covered. This is one idea, and this is where generally the questions are asked from. Another thing that I want to cover is the idea of uniformity and unity, even though it is more related to paper 2, and we would not get into the domain of paper 2 and uniform civil code, but I'll just give you a social perspective on this so that you understand it well. Now, we are saying that India had diversity, India has diversity. So diversity has been a salient feature in the past, and till today is a salient feature. You can say that diversity has increased or decreased. That can be argued, that we have already discussed. But diversity as a feature has been there since ancient past. Now, even though we had this much diversity in our country, what are the forces which has kept us united as a country? Why is it that we find unity in diversity in our country? Because this unity in diversity is the actual salient feature of Indian society, rather than diversity, which can be present in any society. But unity in this diversity is the most important feature. But before that, for the ones who do not understand the ideas of uniformity and unity, just relate the idea of uniformity to, looking similar. The simple idea is, think of your school uniform or uniform that you get in various, your police services, in your defense services. Uniform. What does this uniform do? Makes everyone look similar. So uniformity has to do more with similarity. That everyone looks similar. Everyone, mechanically follows the same culture. So if everyone starts speaking across the country, if everyone starts speaking Kannada, what will be that? Uniformity. That everyone speaks a similar language, which is basically the opposite of diversity, right? But when we talk about unity, unity is that integrating force. Unity is that sense of brotherhood. Unity is that sense of love, affection, care for the members of your society. So unity is basically has more to do with integration. Because wearing the same uniform, looking similar, speaking the similar language does not necessarily mean that you are united. Does not necessarily mean that you will stand up for each other. Does not necessarily mean that your goals, your objectives will be same. So this is the basic idea between uniformity and unity. Now, coming back to the original question, what are the various factors which are responsible for this unity and diversity? Can anyone highlight a couple of factors which are responsible for this unity that we have in our country? Matlub, we'll discuss this rather than discussing. I'll give you a practice question on this aspect, the one that you have asked. Okay, so no answers for this. Let's come to this. There are few factors on the basis of which we find, even though we have diversity in our country, but we are still united. Now, in modern times, you'll find that your constitution is the most important uniting force. That by constitution, we all are supposed to stay together. We adhere to, we stick to this constitution. We, the people of India, right? Then apart from this, you'll find that India is a geographical entity. You see that you have Himalayas from north to east. Then you have this peninsula and you have ocean, Indian Ocean on three sides. So it becomes a separate geographical entity. One is that. Second idea is, you find that because of diversity in geographical factors or in geographical features, like we have plains, somewhere we have hills, right? Somewhere we have plateaus. There is a lot of interdependence when it comes to various, aspects of production. For instance, Haryana and Punjab are the ones who grow rice. These two states do not consume a lot of rice, but the entire country is dependent on their rice production. Similarly, the dependence of hilly people on the people of valley, because you find that you have Indo-Gangetic fertile plains where you can easily and productively grow anything, which is again distributed to most of the parts of the country. So there can be these factors. Then coming down to next factor, you find that you have a universal presence of caste system across our country. And now this caste system is not just present within this same Hindu group, but you find that the caste system has seeped into other religions like Christianity and Islam as well in our country. So this caste system also becomes a uniting force in the sense that you have Kashmiri Pandits and then you have Tamil Brahmins as well. So this caste system, which is across the length and breadth of a country, becomes a uniting force. Then this tradition of interdependence is also coming from caste system. This is the idea of Jajmani system. Because we do not just have to think in terms of unity of the entire country, but unity of the society. So you find that various caste-based groups, various social groups are interdependent on each other, were interdependent on each other for various services. So for instance, the services of a priest are pretty much important, significant in each and every caste group. That one has to get married. There can be death-related rituals. Everything is again dependent on priest. Then similarly, you'll find that there is a dependence on barber in a matter of few death-related rituals. Also, previously in the Jajmani system, both the caste groups or multiple caste groups were dependent on each other for each other's services. So they'll provide them services. In return, either they can ask for services or maybe some agricultural produce. So this is the tradition of interdependence which keeps India united. Then in India, we have this tradition of accommodation which can be related to tolerance. That even within the Hindu fold, you'll find that there are more than 33 crore, say, gods and goddesses. So even though it is considered to be one religion, but there is a lot of diversity. But the idea is that the Indian society is very accommodative. The Indian religion, or rather the Indian way of living, is very accommodative. So they can adjust, they can reconcile with any kind of changing force. Similarly, you'll find that it is accommodative in the sense that there has been advent of multiple religions, people coming from different cultural backgrounds in a country. And we find that everyone has been accommodated so well. Why? Because of our value system. Then the only idea that you would not have understood is religious pilgrimage, because all the others have already been discussed. You'll find that religious pilgrimage is also a uniting force. So particularly in Hindus, traditionally, there are four religious places that a person is supposed to visit towards the end of their life. So one is in north in Uttarakhand, Badrinath. Then the other the place of or the religious shrine is in the west, that is Dwarika. Then the third one is in the east, that is your Jagannath Puri. And then in the south you have Rameshwaram. So to take on this religious pilgrimage, they would have to go across the length and breadth of the country, which becomes a uniting force. So all these factors can be said to the reasons behind the unity in diversity in our country. Apart from this, can you think of another factors which keep us united? Apart from these, any other factors which keep us united? Uh, Aditya, the adoption of common national flag, national anthem, etc., is there with the Indian Constitution. Anything else apart from that? Because this is not an exhaustive list. Yes, these are the most important, most significant ones, but these are not it. Did anyone watch the match yesterday? So sports can also be considered to be uniting force today. Similarly, with the, say, introduction of GST, now, even though with constitution as well, India is one market, but now you see that everywhere you have similar taxes, etc., which depicts uniformity, but also becomes a factor of unity, because it is not just limited to agriculture, but also extends to industrial production, etc., as well. Okay, so you can think of other factors as well. Now, the most important part, because this is something that you would have to do on your own. I would expect everyone to write this answer today, not today, but tomorrow. Just think about this. Take your time to think about this, because this is, rather than a social issue question, it has more of an ethical overtone. It is based in what kind of values do you do you feel are more significant. So the question says India needs a composite culture model, or you can call it the diversity model, rather than a uniformity model of unity. So the ultimate idea is to achieve unity. Ultimate idea is to integrate the people across the country, have a sense of brotherhood amongst people. That is what. This is the ultimate objective. But how do we reach this objective? Do we need the diversity model, or do we need the uniformity model? The uniformity model can be understood in terms of your uniform civil code. So what you have to do is think about both the models. Think about to which of the models do you attach more value and why. This is what the first exercise is. This is the first thing that you have to think about. And also, then later you have to write this answer. So basic structure can be discussed here, but it's better you try it tomorrow, and then we take up the next day. Sorry, not next day, but will then take it up on next Saturday. You just have to remind me once that there was a question that we have not discussed. But the idea is you just think about it first, that the ultimate objective is unity, that people should stay together. It should stay one India, because there is no question of disintegrating this unit or this nation state called India. That is out of question. So the best way to stay peaceful is to stay united. That's how you become stronger. That's how you achieve all the objectives that we have ourselves accepted, coming together. But which model do we use? How do we proceed with this? Whether there has to be a uniformity model or a diversity or composite culture model. So I hope you got the crux, or you understood the crux of the question. Just read this question multiple times. Think about it. Think about various differences between the both. Okay. Now with this, we concluded our first part of the syllabus, that is salient features of Indian society and diversity in India. Now the next topic that we are going to take up are two forces of change. These are basically forces of change. One is globalization and the other one is urbanization. The way we had discussed modernization briefly, we are going to discuss globalization and urbanization in a greater detail. Also, globalization is something that you have already read in paper 3 in your economics lectures. So you already know the economic dimension of globalization, but I cannot help but cover a few economic dimensions of globalization here, because otherwise it would not be possible for me to explain, because there might be a couple of students who do not know about globalization. So what we'll do is we'll take a break, and post the break we'll start with this discussion. Let's take a break and meet again at 3:45, and we'll start our discussion with effects of globalization on Indian society and urbanization. But please be back in time, be there by 3:44 at least, so that the moment we start, we can just continue with the discussion. Welcome back, everyone. So Aditya is asking how many total models are there? See, there are basic two ideas. One is the Western idea of maintaining uniformity, and the Indian idea of maintaining diversity. Now, in take example of France, it has to basically come from the idea of citizenship as well. So, when the state, because every state has a lot of people, now they have to give them their rights, they have their duties in turn. Now state can choose to treat the individual as how they have agreed upon. For instance, in France, every individual is just a citizen of the state doesn't care whether they are coming from a particular religion, whether they have say linguistic differences. For the state, a citizen is a citizen. That is one idea from the perspective of state. Another idea is that the state thinks about or takes in account their religious, their cultural, their social background as well. So these are the basic two ideas around diversity and unity. So all you have to understand is you do not have to worry about models, etc. And maybe using the word model gives it more of a, say, subject specific connotation, but it is not. The basic idea is to achieve unity. What way should we choose? Whether everyone has to look uniform, everyone has to behave in a similar fashion, or can we achieve unity with diversity as well? Okay, so starting with our next chapter, these are basically two forces of change. One is globalization and the other one is urbanization. Now, your syllabus says that we have to look into the effects of globalization on Indian society. So rather than the understanding of globalization, it is more about the impact of globalization and the consequences thereof. Before starting with this, look at this question that they have asked in the previous year. It says, are we losing our local identity for the global identity? Discuss. So basically, it is talking about the impact of globalization on our cultural identity. Whether we are losing our local identity, our cultural identity for this global identity, for becoming this global citizen. So this was the question that will be discussed. This is just to show you that the kind of questions that they can ask. Also, they have asked similar questions like impact of globalization on women, on elderly. They have been asked in different years. They have asked these questions. Similarly, you can find that they can ask a question on any of the component, any of the feature of Indian society. So they are asking about cultural identity. They're asking about the impact of globalization on women. They are one part of our society. Then they have already asked a question on impact on elderly. Similarly, they can ask a question about the impact of globalization on children. Also, you'll find that we have various institutions like caste system, family, marriage, and they can very well ask a question, what is the impact of globalization on these social institutions? So what we'll do in this chapter is, first we'll try to understand what globalization is, then we'll look into a few features of globalization, and then we'll straight away jump into the impact of globalization on Indian society. There we'll also look briefly at the impact of globalization on economy, because globalization is primarily understood as an economic phenomena. And then we'll target our important part, that is impact of globalization on Indian society. Now, most of you sitting here must already be aware of what globalization is, the definition of globalization, etc. But let's prepare a brief background for others who have not understood so far. Look at these things. Russia-Ukraine war has been going on. Now, Israel-Palestine conflict is going on. And you find in the news that this conflict is going on 2,500 kilometers away from you. What can be its possible impact on India? Similarly, Joe Biden got elected as the president in the United States, and they're talking about what can be his election, or what can be the impact of his election on the Indian economy. Similarly, you'll find these food chains. You have Costa Coffee that you'll find pretty much on each and every airport in our country. Then you have Domino's. Domino's is something that I believe that everyone would be aware of. Domino's Pizza. Then you have Nando's. You find that this Costa Coffee is a chain from UK. Nando's is from South Africa. Domino's, you know that serving Italian cuisine, that is pizza, and this is basically based or started from USA, but you find it prevalent in India. Similarly, Indian food options are available elsewhere. So for instance, chai pani in the United States, Little India in Europe. Also, you'll find that not just these things, recently these two restaurants were rated as one of the top restaurants when it comes to Indian cuisine. And to your surprise, you'll find that the Strescent and Gagan Anand, none of the restaurant is based in India. So they are the ones who popularized Indian cuisine, but they are not even based in India. This Gagan Anand is, I believe, in Thailand, and Crescent is, uh, some of you might know, is in Dubai. Not just about food. Food is the example that I choose because everyone is, say, this is something that everyone is aware of. Now, similarly, you look at your brands of electronics like Apple, Samsung, then your social media websites like Facebook, Instagram, then these stores like IKEA, H&M, then the recent example from COVID, the vaccines which were developed. So you find not just food, but clothing, media, sports, technology, everywhere you'll find that multiple companies, multiple organizations from across the globe are present in each and every country. Indian companies like TCS are functioning in more than 100 countries abroad. Indian companies like, for instance, you can find various clothing brands from India that are present across the globe. The ones coming from Birla, for instance. Then similarly, you'll find that your clothes, a lot of your clothes are now manufactured. A lot of brands are manufacturing their products in Bangladesh, in Vietnam, and now they are selling those products either from those countries itself, or you'll find even in Indian stores, you'll find a lot of clothes made in Vietnam, made in China, made in Bangladesh, etc. So that means there has been an integration of the global market. So why are we understanding this in terms of economy? Because you have to remember one thing: when it comes to globalization, when it comes to this integration of the global markets, it primarily starts with some kind of economic benefit. Think about the traders who came down to India years ago to trade in your spices. Think about your trade through the Silk Route. Think about why Britishers came to India. So at the heart of it, you'll find it is always economic factors. But it can be the starting point, but it is not the end point. Why? Because this impact of globalization will impact each and every aspect of your life. Look at our clothes that we are wearing. Look at the language that we speak. Everything basically is a product of globalization. Now, globalization has to be understood as a socio-economic and political process that brings not just people, but markets, goods, services, culture, everything together. The technology that we are using is being shared from various other countries. The watch I am wearing, the spectacles I'm wearing, they are coming from some other country. Then the laptop that you might be using right now be made in China or made in US. So there has been an integration of not just goods, services, but people as well. Now you travel more and more students migrate from India to other countries. for their education. A lot of patients come down to India, and a lot of patients from India go down to other countries to get medical services. Similarly, we are sharing a common culture. Now, you would know by default a lot of, say, Spanish words, watching their media. You would know a lot of, say, Italian words, having their food. So, what is this? This is basically a process which is not just economic, but it impacts you on a social and political level as well. So, it is basically globalization envisages a borderless world. Now, more and more, these national boundaries do not matter. Even though the concept of nationalism, the concept of nation state is important, the idea of sovereignty is important, but you find that these national boundaries do not matter so much now. During COVID, you found that it originated in one place, and it impacted the whole world. Because of the lockdown, there was unavailability of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Why? Because it happened in a country far away from here, that is China, that they were not able to, say, deliver, or they were not able to export their active pharmaceutical ingredients during a COVID lockdown. So something happens in another country can impact and does impact us on a huge scale. So this is what the idea of globalization is. So even though it'll have a lot of economic overtone, but it is not limited to that. And our idea is we have to understand globalization as a social process. But where do we start? We start right where it started. Now, before moving on, before starting to understand the features, I would like to ask you a question. Is this globalization? Is this coming together of people? Is this coming together of markets? Is this coming together of nations? Is it a modern process, or has it been there for a long time now? Yes, Neha, even Israel incident is impacting India as well, our international relations. We'll come to globalization as a political process. We'll understand it as features of globalization, or we'll basically use these ideas to understand globalization. So Abhinav says that yes, it is a modern process. But think about this. If we are talking about markets, goods, services, people, technology coming closer, just think about the Silk Route. Just think about the trade that used to happen in ancient and medieval times. Was it not globalization? What was the advent of Europeans in our country? It is also globalization. So globalization is not a modern process. Yes, you are right to that extent that globalization picked up this pace, became so significant, started influencing all the aspects of our life in modern times. Yes, you can definitely say that. But it is not only a modern process. So when you look at the background, you'll find that globalization has been there because there have been people, traders, not just traders, there have been authors who have came down as visitors to India, experienced the culture here, looked at the political system, looked at art and culture, and they have written books about it. Foreign travelers that you study in ancient India. So that is also an example of globalization, coming together of world. Yes, it was not that significant back then, and it picked up pace only in modern times, particularly after the rise of these international organizations like your IMF, like your WTO, which were responsible for the increasing pace of globalization. Because take the case of India. India adopted this policy of globalization back in the 90s under pressure or due to IMF and WTO interfering. So yes, it cannot be said to be a modern process, but it became this significant with the means of communication increasing or improving, with various ideas flowing throughout the globe. But it is not a modern process. It had started long ago. Because even if you think of the ancient man, just for the sake of just in the search of food, they would have traveled. They would have traveled a lot. and experienced different culture, met different people, learned new techniques, learned how to say produce these crops on their own. So globalization in that sense is not a modern process. Sumit is asking then whether it is an evolving process. Yes, it indeed is. And we will look at globalization as a process. So the moment we say globalization is a process, that means there is no end to it. There is no final product of globalization. That's why we are terming it as a process. So yes, Indus Valley civilization trading with Mesopotamian civilization. Okay, great. Now, starting with our understanding of this globalization, the first thing is interaction between people, various governments, markets across the globe. So as you can see, it is fairly simple to understand that now sitting at your home, using social media, you interact with people across the globe. Say you have to take admission in a college abroad, what would you do? You would look for students who are already enrolled there. You'll try connecting with them over social media or LinkedIn. Similarly, even the markets interact to that extent. And not just interact, they are integrated as well. Your raw materials for a final product come from one country, they are being processed in another country like China, and then all the support system is established in a country like India. What is this? Integration. And not just integration, they are dependent on each other. Because the moment China shut down, China stopped its exports during the COVID period, during the COVID phase, you find that the entire global pharmaceutical manufacturing ecosystem was paralyzed. So there is a lot of interdependence across the economies. And now you would see that again we are sticking to the economic point, and we'll definitely come to the social point, but by that time you have to understand this. Now this interaction, integration and interdependence is not just amongst economies or companies or markets, it is among people as well. The first example of interaction we have taken is amongst people. Now, also by speaking the same language, by sharing the same global culture, we find that we have a lot of similarities. You might be surprised that if you're living in a, say, metro city in India, you might find more similarities in your personality with a European rather than someone coming from the rural areas around you. What is that? Sharing global culture. This is the integration on a global level. Now there is interdependence in the sense that interdependence of economies, interdependence of governments. For instance, you are seeing Israel-Palestine conflict. Now the interdependence of various governments comes into picture. That Israel depends on few countries for their ammunition. Palestine might seek help from another country. Now, these countries can go to an international organization to reach a peace agreement. So, there is a lot of interdependence when it comes to foreign affairs as well. Now, you have to see that this is a multifaceted or multidimensional phenomena, a multidimensional process wherein we interchange a lot of attributes. Think of various cultural attributes like speaking the same language, wearing the same clothes. Then you can think of sharing our technologies. So in India, you create something new. For example, now India is faring well when it comes to space technology. So a lot of other countries share that technology with us. Similarly, you find that India is also dependent, or India is also interchanging various technologies with countries, particularly in defense. Like we get something from France, we get something from the US. Then also you'll find that economic attributes like the idea of open market, the idea of free market. In India, before 1990s, it was a closed economy, more or less closed economy. There were a lot of, say, tight laws. There was a lot of red tapeism. But with globalization, within that also came as an influence of other countries, you find things changed. So we are sharing those economic attributes. Similarly, you'll find that various ideas, various, say, government policies are being shared across the country. So when we say political process, you'll find that on a political level, governments are sharing a lot of attributes. So the advent of democracy in our country is a product of globalization. Similarly, you find a good, or the government finds a good e-governance initiative in another country, they replicate it here. Think about your citizen charter. What are these sharing of political attributes? So all these ideas, be it in terms of technology, be it in terms of culture, politics, economy, everything is being shared today. So yes, there can be a particular country where it originates, but they cannot be the only ones who claim this, unless until it is a closed economy, unless until it is a country which does not interact with outsiders, like North Korea. So we do not know what exactly goes around there. But I'm sure that they still share a lot of attributes, a lot of things, a lot of ideas, a lot of technology with at least a few of their, say, friend countries. Now, along with globalization, just think about this. If a trader has to go to another country, to another land to trade, they would need liberal policies, because there can be countries, even in India, you find that the economy was closed. There was no international money coming in. There was no international money flowing in. So liberalization is one of the important aspects or elements of globalization. So liberalization, capitalism, etc., can be understood as elements of globalization, or can be understood as a process that goes on simultaneously with globalization. Because without liberalization, globalization would not have been possible. So if a product or a service wants to enter your national economy, the boundaries have to be soft. The terms have to be liberal. You cannot impose a lot of import duty on them. What does that mean? That means liberalizing the market so that there is free flow of product and services and people within that, between multiple countries. So India also, you see that 91 reforms are termed as liberalization, privatization and globalization. But liberalization and privatization can be understood as elements of globalization, because if there is no concept of private property, if private owners, private companies are not allowed to open up their own organizations or set up their industries, globalization would not be possible, because the government machinery is not that efficient. Then also, if the state goes on deciding everything, value of every product, value of every service, what has to be the levels of inflation, etc., then it does not help globalization, because globalization relies solely on your market oriented approach. Then the market has to decide what value has to be placed on what product or service. This is what market oriented approach means, that the government is not deciding that will be the value of the product. It is the market, it is the demand, it is the supply that defines or that decides the value of a particular product and service. Now, this globalization is driven by international trade and investment, that more and more countries, more and more individuals are investing in other countries. So you find a lot of foreign direct investment in India. You might be a trader, you might be investing in a lot of countries abroad. Now the market policies are liberal. You can simply invest. Now you trade a lot of things. It is not just about, say, putting in money. It is not just about investment, but it's about trade as well. Now you can get anything that you want shipped from the United States in India. You can get it delivered to your home by paying a simple price. So there is free flow of international trade. Also, think of your companies, your organizations. A lot of them are getting their products from other countries. So think of Apple as a company. It is based in the United States. It gets its raw material from across the globe. It gets everything manufactured in China. They have a lot of service support in China, India, and other South Asian countries. And that's how they function. And their market is global. Their market is international. That's what the idea of globalization is. But two important things that you have to remember is, it is the role of information technology the penetration of your communication technology particularly, and also the push of foreign investment, which has sped up this process of globalization. So by now, what we have discussed is the basic ideas around globalization. You need not remember anything from here, because this has already been covered. I'm sure this has already been covered with your in your economic lectures. So I'm just giving you a brief background of it. Now you see that it is an ongoing process. As you have asked a question, I forgot. Yes, Sumit had asked a question whether it is an ongoing process or not. So you see, it is an ongoing process. 10 years ago, you could not have simply say get anything shipped at your home, but now you can. 10 years before that, it was hard to uh, get to interact with someone living abroad, but now it has become very simple with Skype, with Facebook, with Instagram. You can interact with anyone. So yes, it is an involving process. But you might ask me a question, which will be a very important question, that is it evolving? Is it getting stronger? That globalization as a force is getting stronger or weaker? Now, this is a question that we'll try to answer, but keep this question in your mind so that you can analyze various facets of globalization, which will help you with understanding its impact on Indian society as well. So, globalization has basically, with the role of information communication technology, you find that your national boundaries do not matter so much. That is what the idea of deterritorialization means. That means the geographical boundaries, the geographical distance does not matter that much. So now you have more and more instances of people traveling or migrating from one place to another. People coming from other countries to India, because you find if you stay in cities like Bangalore, Delhi, you'll find that a lot of people of other nationalities can be found here in India. Similarly, a lot of Indians, your brothers, your cousins, your friends, a lot of them are traveling abroad now for their studies. Why? Because it has become simpler with the evolving means of information and communication technology. So, this is a brief background, this is the brief idea about globalization. And now you think about what can be the reasons behind the spread of globalization. Yes, Chituri, you keep that question in mind. We will discuss this question. And I hope you got your answer to globalization as a political process, because if an economy is to be liberalized, it is ultimately coming from political decision. Similarly, we share a lot of government, the governments share a lot of ideas, a lot of new policies, schemes, etc. amongst each other. That is how it is a political process as well. So you can think of it as a political process in multiple ways. I just have given you a few instances. So, what can be the reasons behind the spread of globalization? As I've already highlighted, your trade and economic opportunities, or your opportunities to earn more money, is the primary force, is the primary reason behind the spread of globalization. Even if you can think about the traders of the ancient past, they were here, or they were traveling for the earning more profit. Similarly, even if you think about companies today, why would they enter a particular market? To earn more and more money. Why would Amazon come to India? Because they know the population is high and we can capture that market. It is a growing market and they do not have an alternate there. So ultimately, everything revolves around better economic opportunities and better profit. But what can be the other reasons? So another important reason that I've already told you is technological advancement. Because few years ago, 200, 300 years ago, it will take days, months altogether to travel from one place to another. But now, in a matter of 3 hours, you can reach Middle East. In a matter of 2.5 hours, you can land in Southeast Asia. So now, with the technological advancement, you can travel anywhere, and also at the same time, you'll find that you can connect with anyone sitting elsewhere. So the ones who are working in corporates, the corporate is based in one country, you have one office here, then you have 15 more offices in other countries, and you find how seamless the communication is. You just have to press a button, the meeting opens up, and you can interact with someone sitting 5,000, 2,000 kilometers away from you. How is it possible? Only because of technological advancement. Then various economic events across the globe. Now understand this as there was, say for example, 2008 Lehman Brothers crisis. Similarly, in India, you can think of the problem, the deficit that we had back in the 80s. So because of this thing, they cannot help but seek help from others. They cannot help but open up their boundaries, open up their national economies. That's what India did. That when it was not faring well, they asked them to open up their boundaries. They asked them to let investments flow inside the country so that the economy can get better, can get stronger. So various economic events across the globe can reinforce this uh, integration, or reinforce this process of globalization. Think about COVID. Now, post COVID or during COVID, you find that there was a lot of cooperation amongst the countries to develop the vaccine. There's a lot of cooperation amongst countries to help each other in providing oxygen cylinders, in providing other facilities, PPE kits, etc. So any kind of not just economic event, but it can be any other event like an act of terrorism. So think about global cooperation post your 9/11 in the US, in the United States, that a lot of countries have come together, are cooperating to tackle terrorism. Now, this can also be thought of in terms of your various regional groupings, that multiple countries are coming together. They share a common objective which they want to reach together. So they cooperate with each other. Then now the newest thing is your climate change. So you have various issues related to climate. You have various environmental problems. So a lot of countries are coming together in form of various conference of parties. You can think of your International Solar Alliance uh, from COP. So countries are now increasingly cooperating with each other, discussing with each other with regards to various environmental issues. So these all can be considered to be the reasons behind globalization. Now, post this, as we have already discussed, that liberalization, without liberalization, privatization, etc., globalization would not have been possible. So just think of them in terms of elements of globalization. Because, say, if there is no concept of private property, if there is no privatization that is happening, would anyone have an incentive to travel all the way to another country, or maybe to open a channel for trade? Not really. So privatization is one of the important aspects. Then you think of capitalism, or capitalism in the sense of market oriented approach. So if only the state or only the governments were to decide values of commodities, if only the governments were to decide values of services, people would not have been interested in expanding. Now with capitalism, you find that it is market oriented approach, and market has to decide what will be the price of a particular product. So this also becomes an important element of globalization. Then without liberalization, without opening up of economies, without taking down various import duties, without letting investors come invest in a country in various industries, etc., globalization would not have been possible. Industrialization is another factor, that not just industrialization, but even setting up of various service sector units, etc., also is an element of globalization. Because if they are not but if they do not have, say, the concept of private property, or if private individuals cannot own businesses, then all these things will fall down, or globalization would not happen. Then you have international relations, because countries have to basically maintain relations between each other. They have to maintain relationship with the international organizations, which also is considered as an element of globalization. Now, this was just a brief background. Need not remember anything from here. They would not ask a single question from this in paper one. What they'll ask in paper one is the impact of globalization on Indian society, and they have mentioned the exact same thing in your syllabus. Now, to understand the impact of globalization, first thing that we have to do is First thing is, we'll look into various levels of impact. One. Second thing is, we'll try to take out, or we'll try to identify various institutions and components of Indian society on which they can probably ask a question. And how to go about it, because the logic will remain the same, that I'll explain you how to go about it. But before that, you understand the levels of impact. Now think of the language English entering India. So English entered India. There are few people who accepted it wholeheartedly, that yes, they accommodated this language. Please be our guest, stay here. I'll speak my own language. You can speak your own language, and we are fine with it. That is what basically we have accepted that cultural trait, and we are coexisting with it. So you can speak your mother tongue and you can speak English as well. That is what coexistence. Now there can be a thing that English, once it entered India, we were amazed by it, that wow, what a brilliant language. And we get overwhelmed by it, and we completely forget our own traditional languages. We forget our mother tongue and start speaking completely in English. What is that? Complete submission. That we submitted to this force of globalization, or we submitted to this cultural force completely. Just think about our clothing pattern, because clothing is something where you'll find that we have completely submitted to the Western forces. How often, apart from maybe your couple of festivals, how often do you wear anything traditional? Anything that generally, was generally, say, prevalent in Indian society? How often do you wear a kurta or a dhoti? So when it comes to clothing, we can find this example of complete submission. Everyone is dressed in a similar way, shirt, jeans, or trousers, etc. Then there can be an amalgamation of both. So think of English coming to India. One is you accept it. Second is you completely submit to this. Third is English plus Hindi becomes Hinglish. This is a perfect example of amalgamation. That how do we speak? If you are Hindi speaking, for instance, what you'll do is you'll use, or maybe you'll frame the sentence in Hindi, but you'll use a lot of English words in there. The way you type SMS text, or the way you type your WhatsApp text, you'll find that you use Hinglish. Similarly, English and Kannada. So you'll use English and Kannada together, or you'll try to write, say, something in Kannada using English words or English alphabets. So what is that? Amalgamation. Similarly, if you think about amalgamation, you can think of the language Urdu. A beautiful amalgamation of Hindi and Persian. That the language came from there. We had our own language. It got mixed up. It got amalgamated. And we created something new. That is Urdu. This is amalgamation. Then the fourth level of impact is complete rejection. Okay, it's here. Sorry. Is a complete rejection of that idea, is a backlash against these forces of cultural change. Take example of Valentine's Day. Take example of Christmas. Take example of the New Year's. There are in the society, you'll find that there are people who accept it. They are fine with it. They do not celebrate it, but they're fine with it. Then there are people who celebrate it wholeheartedly. Then there are people who give it an Indian flavor by bursting crackers, etc., or maybe lighting diyas. Then there are people who completely reject this idea of Western culture. And every year you find that, particularly on Valentine's Day and your Halloween's Day, you have protests from various right-wing groups, various conservative groups, saying that these festivals do not belong in India and these should not be celebrated here. What is that? Complete rejection or backlash against a particular force. Now think about this. I have just taken one example to explain to this. The idea is, whenever there is a change, there can be multiple levels of impact. You can reject the change, you can accept the change, you can be completely subsumed by the change, or there can be backlash against the change. So this is basically the levels of impact are basically with the forces of change. These can be cultural forces of change. These can be political forces of change. These can be economic forces of change. But in our context, what we'll do is we'll stick to the cultural aspect or the impact on cultural level. So there are four types of impact. Just to say summarize this, you find that when it comes to levels of impact, there can be complete acceptance, or there can be acceptance and coexistence. Then there can be complete submission to the idea. There can be a backlash against those forces, and ultimately there can be an amalgamation of the new and the traditional. So these are various levels of impact that will help you understand the impact on Indian society. This will help you broaden your perspective if at all a question is asked on the cultural traits. So Aditya is asking, celebration of birthday is also an impact of globalization. See, celebrating birthday is not something Western, but the thing is, the so basically we follow the calendar that we follow, the Western one. It fixes a date, but when it comes to the Hindu calendar, it is on the basis of, or the Indian calendar, it is on the basis of the position of stars, etc. So you'll find that in your within your home, you'll find that your grandparents particularly would wish you on the day according to the Indian calendar, right? So yes, there is a change that the Western calendar fixes a date, because think of the tithis that are there in the Hindu calendar, and you find that the celebration of various festivals, like say Diwali, is on the basis of that Hindu calendar, wherein you find that every year it falls on a different date, whereas your Western festivals would fall on the same date every year, right? I hope you're getting this idea. Yes, so the way in which it is celebrated can be a Western influence, because now there's a lot of, say, what to say, that the celebrations have changed. Now you are going out in pubs and bars and celebrating your birthday. Previously it was a different idea. Okay, so Yama is asking, kindly repeat backlash. Okay, so backlash is basically complete rejection against any forces of change. As I've given you an example of rejection of Valentine's Day, that some of you might hold very dear, that it is something important to us. Similarly, think about Brexit. Now, apart from all the other economic reasons, you find that when the political debate around Brexit was going on, you find that it was mostly the conservative people who voted for Brexit. Why? As a backlash against globalization, that they want to be a separate entity. They do not want to be a part of the European Union. They do not want the boundaries to be so fluid. Similarly, similarly, there can be backlash against various other things, right? So if you would have seen that there are tribal groups, particularly, say if anyone is maybe they can say confirm this point, that in tribal areas in the Western Ghats, where the government is trying to lay down railway infrastructure, they have completely rejected that idea. They do not want any change. So when you think of backlash, there can be a certain group in the society which wants the condition to remain as it is. They do not want any kind of change. So think about the increased push towards make in India. Think about the push towards making or pushing Hindi throughout the country. Think about the revival of Sanskrit as a language. What are these? These show basically a backlash against various forces of globalization. So Ragini, not just in Kerala, but even in few parts of Karnataka, like Coorg, etc., they're not letting the government lay down that infrastructure. Okay, so explain amalgamation. Okay, so you can say, just repeat it. So amalgamation is a mixture of both. This is amalgamation. So English plus Hindi becomes English. Hindi plus Persian becomes Urdu. What is that? Amalgamation. Similarly, you can take idea of your Indo-Western suits that are very popular during weddings. So they'll wear that Indian kurta, traditional kurta, and an English pant. What is that? Indo-Western dress. So wherever you find, uh, say, uh, say integration of the Western with the Eastern, or maybe not just Western, but you can think of other things. Just think about amalgamation. Maybe okay, most of the people relate to food. So take example of tandoori momos. Now, this cuisine is from some part of the world, right? And giving it an Indian flavor, mixing it with something Indian. That is what amalgamation. And do not worry, do not worry about this. We are again going to take it up as a separate thing. I'm just showing you these levels of impact, that how any force of change can impact with the society in general. Yes, so wearing of jeans on kurta. Great. Okay, so to understand the impact of globalization on Indian society, so first idea is, when we had, on the basis of residence, we had classified Indian society as urban, rural, tribal. So we have to think about the impact of globalization on these three societies. Similarly, within these societies, you have various groups. You have minorities, you have scheduled castes and tribes, you have elderly population, women and children, impact on various social groups. Then it comes down to impact on, okay, sorry, then it comes to impact on various social institutions like family, something that we have already understood, marriage, caste system. These are various social institutions. What is the impact of globalization on these institutions? So before starting with this is something that we have already discussed. So what I would want you people to do is, let's take up a blank slide, and I say that before we create the structure, I would want you to ask that what are the impacts of globalization on the institution of family in India. Let's do this exercise so that you understand how you have to proceed, because this is something that you have already discussed. So if you want to look at the impacts of globalization on the institution of family, how do you do it? The first thing is, you would have to look into the features and the functions of family as an institution. And then you'll start looking into what kind of changes globalization has brought about. So Ragini is saying that when we talk of features, that we have become nuclear, the families have become nuclear as compared to joint families. What else? So Aditya, I'll just write your point. We were saying that family has to be understood as a collective. Family has been a collective force since the very beginning, but now we find a trend towards individualism. Where is it coming from? The West, that everyone has equal rights within the family. Everyone can do whatever they want. What is this? The idea of individualism, that the individual is more important than the collective. So it is also seeping in Indian families. So family is not just limited now to blood, marriage, etc. Newer forms of family like live-in relationships, etc., are coming up. Now, see, without proceeding to all the other parts which have already been discussed, I just wanted to see whether you can think in the right direction. I find that all the features have already been discussed. All the functions, how the functions are changing, the function of socialization, etc., has been discussed. And we see that this has happened in the light of modernization and globalization. So whenever we were talking about changes on the family structure, we were making one or the other force responsible for the same. So all you have to understand is these questions are the simplest form of questions that can be asked in the examination, and they have asked these kind of questions on multiple occasions. So now that you have understood, now you got a knack of how to proceed with a question of this nature. You can do it, you can replicate it to any other institution. So be it family, be it marriage, be it caste, you can replicate it to any institution. The only thing that you would have to work out is the introduction, so that you create the background. Because if you say that caste system is changing because of globalization, yes, you can very well highlight the change, that endogamy is not the rule now. Your intercaste marriages are becoming more acceptable, but you'll say that it is under the influence of, say, Western culture, where spouse selection where spouse selection is being done by the individuals. It is more about the bonding, the compatibility of the individuals, and the family is just there to attend the ceremony. The family members, etc., are there just to legitimize the wedding. Otherwise, all the crucial decisions are being taken care of by the individuals themselves. Just think about this. You must have watched a lot of shows. You must have watched a lot of American shows. You find that if they're planning their wedding, it is generally the individuals who are planning it. They might take a couple of maybe help with respect to something from their family members or friends. But here in India, once your marriage is fixed, it is completely, entirely duty of your parents to fix all the things, to find out what kind of food are we going to have, where the wedding is going to take place, etc. So these kind of changes can also be thought about in terms of globalization. So having less number of children, yes. From polygamy to monogamy, again, yes. So the basic idea is, when you look at these social institutions like family, marriage, caste system, you can simply figure out the changes looking at various features and how they have changed. And we have pretty much discussed each and every feature. Yes, I'm not saying that there is a possibility that they can ask a very twisted question on this. But again, if you practice more and more number of questions, if you revise it properly, you will not face any problem. Okay. So we can say that it is very easy to find out what are what can be the possible impacts of globalization on Indian society. We will come to it one by one. We'll start with various dimensions of impact, because there can be an economic dimension that we do not have to give a lot of importance to, but you have to understand, because ultimately your economy will directly impact society. Similarly, there are a lot of changes on the political and administrative level. That socio-cultural is the most important one that we have to see, and then impacts on environment and technology. Everything is fairly simple to understand, because you already understand the force of globalization, and generally globalization is understood as a force or as a process in terms of its impact on society. Okay, getting back to our socio-cultural aspect. In socio-cultural aspect, what I've said is that we are going to look at the impact of globalization on various forms of society, and I believe you can do it very well. We will come to it, we will structure it, we'll create a question and make you answer that question. Then we have to look at impact of globalization on various social groups, because a question has already been asked on these two social groups. So we cannot forget about other social groups as well. Then similarly, we have to look at the impact of globalization on various social institutions, which has been taken care of, because we have already dealt all those things in detail. Now, coming to the various dimensions of impact, let's take up the economic dimension first. Now, because of liberalization, we say that liberalization is an important element of globalization, and it is because of liberalization, privatization, etc., that globalization has been possible. Now, we are also saying that liberalization has also impacted globalization. Liberalization is also an impact of globalization. How? For globalization to work, we need liberalization. But for globalization to pace up, liberalization has to happen in turn. So it is like the egg and chicken situation, that for globalization to happen, we need liberalization. And liberalization is also an impact of globalization. So you opened up your market, let the global forces do its work, and then you realize that, okay, this is doing fairly well. And you open up your economies. You open up your economies more. So the second phase of your liberalization of policies is what? Impact of globalization. So the first phase of liberalization is basically inviting globalization. And the second one is an impact of globalization. Now, this is a simple idea that you have understood, that liberalization is opening up of economies. It is important for globalization, and it is also an impact of globalization. Now, tell me this thing, because of this liberalization, how, what kind of impact did we have on our economy? What kind of impact did liberalization have on our economy? Can someone please suggest this? Ease of doing business, great. What else? That now it is easier for organizations to set up their businesses here in India. It is easier for them to trade. It is easier for them to provide services and products. Reduction in taxes, yes. Inflow of FDI, increased number of investments, great. Bigger markets, great. So Sumit has highlighted that with liberalization, you find that all the countries are opening up their markets. Even India has. Now the company which wants to sell their product, previously it was limited to the same country, it was limited to the same market, but now their market is global. Now they can sell anywhere across the globe. But also you'll find that we can simply highlight the positives of it. It is very simple, that liberalization has done well. Now you have, say, increased competition. Because of increased competition, the quality of products is better. Because now you have better choice of product, because you can, say, get anything shipped. You have multiple companies, you can get anything shipped from anywhere. So you have, as a consumer, you have better choice of products. But think about this, what about the local industries? Just think about what about the local industries, and you'll get to understand the negative impact of liberalization. So to think about this, you say there are local industries which cannot compete with these international giants. They have infinite resources. And these local industries, working at a very thin margin, cannot help but close down after a few years once the bigger companies have entered the market. And you can take that example in pretty much every industry. Once the international products are made available, no one cares about the local product, because the local product would be of a lower quality, of a lower grade. The pricing would not be as competitive as these international players, because you find that once they enter, these bigger chains, once they enter in a country, they'll have these kind of sales. They'll give such a price for years altogether, for an year or two, that the other local industry or the other local manufacturers are simply vanished from the society or from the market. And ultimately what happens is, not just these local industries, your various self-help groups, your cooperative societies also get impacted because of globalization. Similarly, if you think of privatization, it is also an impact of globalization, but this privatization will also impact society. Again, you have to apply the same logic, because when once you make everything private, once you have made your education, your healthcare, everything private, now the focus of these private players is what? Profit, as opposed to the motive of, say, or of your government. If there is a PSU, their motive is to provide services to people. Their motive is to provide a good quality and cheaper products to people. But when it comes to private players, you find that it is profit that is the sole motivation behind opening up, behind opening, say, any kind of industry or any kind of starting any kind of product or services in the market. But as a positive impact, you can find that private players are more efficient. Private players know how to get things done. And you have seen that how things work in a government hospital and how things work in a private hospital. And if I ask you this question, you would always say that I would want to go to a private hospital rather than a government hospital because of the sheer condition of that place. So hold on to privatization. Do not worry about it, because privatization is going to get covered with education, is going to get covered with healthcare as well, because those are your two topics mentioned in paper 2, that is social justice. For now, just understand it in the terms of positive and negative impact. Now, growth of MNCs as an impact of globalization. Because of globalization, these multinational companies are now opening up their offices, are opening up their customer care centers, are opening up their assembly lines in a country, which is generating a lot of revenue for the government, which is generating a lot of employment. But the lopside is, again, it simply kills the local industry. These MNCs have infinite resources, and in every aspect of economy, they'll give a very tough competition, and rather a very unfair competition, to other players. So I hope I do not have to repeat myself again and again when it comes to economic impact of globalization. All you have to understand is, do look at both the angles, both the sides. Then internationalization and digitalization of money. Now, digitalization can directly be thought of in terms of, say, the increased use of credit cards, UPI payments, etc. Also, the introduction of cryptocurrency. Then internationalization is that now your few currencies can be used across the globe. Any currency can be interchanged in any country, and there are a lot of countries which accept dollar as a, say, standard. So this is what internationalization of money. Now, there can be problems. Now, I'm not getting into the economic problems, the problems related to inflation, etc., because that is something that is ideally being dealt in paper 3, and I believe that all of you would have covered those concepts. Then the investment has been globalized. Previously, either it was government which was investing in various industries, etc. Then there were a few private players who were investing in these industries and services. Now it is the global market as a whole which invests in any kind of company, organization. You look at your new startups like Paytm, Zomato, etc. They have investments from multiple companies from across the globe. They have investments from people in general. Now, those people might be sitting in some other country who are investing as individuals. There can be foreign institutional investors as well. There can be foreign governments who also invest in companies. So now the investment has been globalized. Next part is impact of globalization on agriculture. Now, this is also something that you read with human geography, but understand this. If you think of impact on agriculture, it can be both positive and negative. First, think of positive. And please tell me, just please tell me if I need to write all these points, because I believe this is fairly simple. And again, this is something that they're not going to ask a question on apart from the working class. All those answers will come from the PPT itself. Can you please suggest? If only the discussion is helping, or do you want me to write these things? Okay, so you're talking about the role of technology in agriculture. Now, with globalization, with the with your genetically modified crops, and particularly your green revolution, India achieved food security, which is again a positive impact on agriculture. Now you have newer products available in the market. Now you have better techniques that are being used because of globalization. At the same time, you'll find that because of globalization, the use of pesticides, insecticides has increased, which has its own problems. Now, because of globalization, you find that these genetically modified crops, a few of them which are not even, which have not even been checked for safety, are becoming a problem. And that's why you find that as a backlash to this change, a lot of organic farming is taking place in our country. Right? So, organic farming industry is showing a steep rise in a country. Why? As a backlash to all the, or as a solution to all the problems because of these various methods, or the role of technology in agriculture. Then also you'll find that with globalization, a lot of food processing industries have been set up, which use which use this agricultural produce as their raw material. Similarly, with globalization, for agriculture, we have now open markets, we have now global markets. So Indian produce, so for example, particularly your GI tagged crops, for example, your Alfonso or Ratnagiri mango, now they are being sold across the globe. So now they have a bigger market to sell their agricultural produce. Otherwise, it had a very local nature. Then there can be negative impacts as well. That because of this liberalization and globalization, these smaller farmers are not able to cope up with the market. The bigger companies, these bigger MNCs will come, and not just MNCs, even bigger Indian companies will come, and they'll take their produce at a very cheaper price, take a huge margin, keep a huge margin, and sell it very inflated prices. And this is something very normal. If you come to my hometown, you'll find that the price of various products or various fruits that you find here in the market is at least 200% compared to what you get there in rural areas. Why? Because they're selling it directly to the consumer. But once these middlemen enter in the field of agriculture, you find that they have to work on margins, which is totally understandable. But along with margins, they get into various malpractices like hoarding, black marketing, etc., which is also detrimental to agriculture. Then also with the with an improvement in technology, you find now you have cold chain management. You can keep your products refrigerated and transport them from one place to another in the country, right? You get a lot of refrigerated products. Just think of the uh, supply chain for milk across the country. It completely works on cold chain management, that you have these big refrigerated trucks which carry them from one place to another. And then the next aspect is that of poverty. So who all believe here that poverty has declined under the influence of globalization? Whether poverty has declined under the influence of globalization or it has increased under the influence of globalization. What is your say about this? Because we are going to leave this aspect. I'll just give you a basic overview, and we are going to leave this aspect, leave this question for a discussion on poverty. And please do not worry that I have left something. I would not forget, because these things are already there in the PPT. And I just want you to understand that how various chapters are related, because role of women is one chapter, globalization is one chapter. They club them together, ask a question. Similarly, the question on population and women, population and poverty, these are very frequently asked questions. So you have to understand the interconnectedness when it comes to these topics. Okay, so Ragni is saying that it has increased. Chitru is saying declined. Sneha says declined. Vishal says relatively decreased. Okay, so now the thing is, we right now we are not going to conclude this here. I'll just give you a couple of perspectives. We will conclude this discussion in a chapter on poverty. So both of you are right. Now you find that overall poverty numbers have declined, and your recent multidimensional poverty index also has reflected a steep decline in poverty numbers in India. So how does that happen? With creation of more employment, with setting up of more industries, with your service sector opening up, with more opportunities to people to earn. Now you can also move outside the country and earn. So now there are multiple opportunities because of globalization. But at the same time, you'll find that all these opportunities, just think about this, all these opportunities are limited either to the skilled workers of the industrial sector or to the skilled workers of your service sector. What about those who do not have a decent education? What about those who do not have any skill set? Have these MNCs have these bigger companies created something for them? Because everything now is being automated. Every process is now being automated. With artificial intelligence coming into picture, a lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of skills are becoming redundant. For instance, the job of a content creator, it has become redundant now. Why? Because most of the companies have started using artificial intelligence for that matter. Not just this, how about your unskilled labor? So one idea is that yes, there has been a decline in poverty, but we are going to cover all the aspects related to poverty separately in our chapter on poverty. Then you think about the working class, where I started. So yes, if you think of your service sector or your white collar jobs, yes, your white collar jobs, people working in the service sector have been impacted positively to a certain extent, and I'll come to the negatives of it. But if you think of your blue collar workers, they haven't. If you think of your unskilled labor, they haven't. They haven't benefited at all from globalization. Yes, for a short duration of time, they might have, but not now. But again, for working class, one better thing is that because of this global influence, even the governments have created policies when it comes to the working class, that what are going to be the terms and conditions of work of your employment, which is decided. So you are not supposed to work beyond certain hours. You are not supposed to work below a certain wage. All these things have also been an impact of globalization. Otherwise, you remember, if when we read about industrial revolution in the UK, or when we talk about the situation of industries and particularly the situation of workers, it was miserable. So as an impact of globalization, it has improved. So again, there is no way to conclusively answer these questions that what has exactly happened, but both positive and negative impacts will be there. Because once we started with this impact, the idea of impact, you'll find that everywhere you'll find both positive and negative, on society, on culture, on economy. When you come to the cottage industry, we are already saying that it has registered a steep decline. Most of the cottage industries went down. But yes, few have survived. Yes, there is still a limited market for these products, but overall, there has been a deindustrialization in our country. The way we say in the case of Britishers, when you understand the economic impact of British on India, you say that there has been deindustrialization in India. But also, you have to see that yes, these opening up of our economy and globalization has gave us avenues, have opened up multiple industries. But what happened to the cottage industries is right before you. So much so that now, but you see that even the government is trying to maybe bring them up, if not in real, but at least on paper. There are improvements when it comes to our local manufacturers. Then this push towards make in India, what is this? This is basically a backlash against globalization to help or to sustain our local industry. Then apart from this, there is this last idea of neo-colonialism that I want you to understand. They would not, do not worry, they would not ask a question. Now, in colonialism, we say that one country takes over another country directly, manages everything directly, like Britishers. So they took control of the country to tweak the economic policies in their favor so that they can send money to their own country for their own benefit, for the benefit of their own economy. They make colonies, control those colonies directly, and you have understood all this in terms of your economic impact of British rule, so I need not repeat it. But then there is this idea of neo-colonialism. Now this neo-colonialism is the idea that even though these countries do not have a direct impact now, but with their financial support, etc., they try to overpower other countries. They try to assert their power over other countries. Take example of China. What China does is, even though it was not, say, colonial force back then, it was a country which was also colonized. But now you see that with China gaining power, what they do is they invest a lot of money in a particular economy. They ask them to behave in the way that they want. If they want less import duty, they would have to. If they say, I want to open a defense base here, or a naval base here. They would have to. Else, China will take out its money and their entire economy will collapse. And not just in case of China, even if you look at the company, the countries like say UK, they still have a lot of hold when it comes to various economies. Also, neocolonialism can be understood in terms of the global corporatism that is happening, because most of these bigger MNCs are coming from these countries, like the United States, like France, UK, Germany. Now they have financial power, they have political power, and it is said that they are the ones who actually decide various national policies. Even in our country, you see that they do not ever go outright against these corporates. And generally, you find budget after budget, it is generally the corporates who benefit. This is something called global corporatism. You do not have to remember the word, just have to remember the idea that these companies, these global companies, these bigger MNCs have a hold over particularly developing economies. That they are the ones who are deciding their policies for them. So, yes, can be understood like that trap. Also, we are talking about the role of international organization which are under the influence of the bigger countries, and these international organization also take down your developing countries. Is also an example. Yes, it is also an example of neocolonialism. Great. So Sneha is saying MG Narega is there for them. Okay, you're talking about the working class. But yes, MG Narega is not. MG Narega is a substitute till the government can create employment for them. Right. So MG Narega is not a substitute to any kind of say corporate job. Uh, so yes, you can say conclusive. In conclusion, you can say yes, globalization has both positive and negative impacts on the economy. And yes, they have created jobs, they have opened up new opportunities. You have better products now, better quality products now, you have better choices now. But ultimately, they have also ruined the local industry, the cottage industry, which employed a lot of these people for whom we are seeking MG Narega. Okay, great. So let's do one thing. Now it is already time for your tea break. What we'll do is, after the break, we'll start at 5:30, and after the break, we'll start with political impact of globalization, and we'll try to quickly come to our subject matter, that is socio-cultural impact of globalization. But by the time we reach socio-cultural impact of globalization, we would have understood pretty much everything. So if you have any questions, you can ask in that session. So you have to join, if you know, you have to join another session at 5:30 after the break. There is a third session that has been scheduled. Okay, then see you at 5:30. Please be there. Yeah. Okay. Okay. We'll start at 5:33. Do not worry. We'll not make you lose your 3 minutes, precious 3 minutes. Okay. Great. Let's see you at 5:30.